Captain Sarah Chen pressed her face against the observation deck's reinforced glass, watching the massive creature drift through the void like a dying moon. The albino star wolf stretched nearly 3 kilometers from snout to tail, its once magnificent fur now dulled to the color of old bone. What made her stomach turn wasn't the creature's size or its ghostly appearance, but the millions of barnacle-like parasites covering every inch of its body. The parasites pulsed with a sickly green light, each one the size of a small spacecraft. They had burrowed deep into the star wolf's hide, creating craters and valleys across its flesh. Some were so large they had formed their own ecosystems, with smaller parasites feeding off the larger ones, in an endless cycle of consumption. "How long has it been like this?" Sarah asked Dr. Martinez, the xenobiologist who had discovered the creature drifting near the Kepler station. "Our scans suggest at least 200 years, Martinez replied, her voice heavy with sympathy. "Maybe longer. The parasites have been feeding off its life force, keeping it alive but in constant agony. It can't die, but it can't truly live either." The star wolf's massive head turned slowly toward their ship, revealing eyes that burned like dying stars. Even through the vacuum of space, Sarah could feel the weight of its gaze, the depth of suffering that had accumulated over centuries. The creature let out a sound that their instruments barely registered, a low-frequency moan that seemed to vibrate through the ship's hull and into their bones. "What about the Galactic Council?" Sarah asked. "Surely they've tried to help?" Martinez shook her head bitterly. The Zephyrians declared it a natural phenomenon, not worth their resources. The Crystalline Empire said the creature was cosmically irrelevant. Even the Peaceful Collective voted to ignore it, claiming interference would disrupt some greater cosmic balance. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. She had heard this story too many times before. The galaxy's great civilizations, with all their advanced technology and supposed wisdom, turning their backs on suffering because it was inconvenient or unprofitable. They would spend billions on territorial disputes or trade negotiations, but a creature in pain was beneath their notice. "The parasites," Sarah said, studying the readings on her tablet. "They're not just feeding on its body, are they?" "No," Martinez confirmed. "They're draining its consciousness, its memories, its very soul." The star wolf is one of the oldest creatures in the galaxy. It has witnessed the birth and death of stars, the rise and fall of civilizations. All of that knowledge, that experience, is being slowly consumed by these things. The star wolf moved again, a slight twitch of its enormous tail that sent ripples through space-time itself. Sarah realized that even this simple movement probably caused the creature unbearable pain as the parasites dug deeper, their feeding frenzy intensified by any motion. "There has to be something we can do," Sarah said, turning to face her small crew. The USS Determination was just a mid-sized research vessel, part of Earth's modest contribution to galactic exploration. They didn't have the firepower of a Zephyrian dreadnought or the advanced healing technology of the Crystalline Empire. "Captain," said Lieutenant Torres from the engineering station, "I've been analyzing the parasites' energy signatures. They're not like anything in our databases, but they do seem to have a weakness." Sarah moved to Torres's station, hope flickering in her chest. "What kind of weakness?" "They're incredibly sensitive to certain electromagnetic frequencies. The problem is, generating enough power to affect millions of them simultaneously would require resources we simply don't have. We'd need at least a dozen ships with specialized equipment." "What if we contact Earth?" suggested Commander Jackson. "Maybe the colonial fleet could spare some vessels?" Sarah knew the answer before she asked. "How long would it take them to get here?" 18 months, minimum," Torres replied. "And that's assuming they approve the mission." Which he didn't need to finish. Earth was still considered a minor player in galactic politics. Their requests for assistance were often ignored or delayed indefinitely. By the time help arrived, if it arrived at all, the star wolf might finally succumb to its torment. The creature's moan echoed through space again. Longer this time, filled with such desolation that several crew members wiped away tears. Sarah made a decision that would either save a life or destroy her career. "Torres, I want you to run every calculation you can think of. What would it take for us, alone, to generate enough electromagnetic energy to disrupt those parasites? Captain, even if we overloaded every system on the ship, we couldn't possibly— I didn't ask if it was safe, Sarah interrupted. I asked what it would take. Torres exchanged glances with Martinez and Jackson before returning to his console. His fingers flew over the controls as he ran simulation after simulation. The Starwolf continued its slow drift through space, unaware that a small group of humans was desperately trying to find a way to end 2 centuries of suffering. There might be a way, Torres said finally, his voice uncertain. If we stripped every non-essential system, rerouted all power through the main deflector, and overloaded our fusion cores past all safety limits, we might be able to generate a focused electromagnetic pulse strong enough to disrupt the parasites in a limited area. How limited? Sarah asked. Maybe 10% of the creature's body. And the pulse would likely destroy our ship in the process. The bridge fell silent, except for the gentle hum of life support systems. Sarah looked out at the Starwolf again, watching as it struggled to move its massive head toward a distant star. Even that small motion caused visible distress as the parasites responded to the creature's pain by feeding more aggressively. There's another problem, Martinez said quietly. Even if we could remove some of the parasites, the damage they've done is extensive. The creature's nervous system has been compromised. Its immune responses destroyed. It might not survive the removal process. But it might, Sarah said. It might have a chance. Commander Jackson stepped forward. Captain, I have to advise against this course of action. We have a duty to preserve our ship and crew. Sacrificing ourselves for a creature that might die anyway is exactly what humans do, Sarah finished. It's what we've always done. When everyone else walks away from suffering, we stay. When the odds are impossible, we try anyway. She turned to face her crew, seeing doubt and fear in their faces, but also something else. A flicker of the same stubborn determination that had driven humanity to the stars in the first place. I'm not ordering anyone to stay, she continued. We can launch the escape pods, set them on a course for the nearest inhabited system, but I'm going to try to help that creature, even if it kills me. The crew exchanged glances, having silent conversations with their eyes. One by one, they returned to their stations. Escape pods are for quitters, Captain, Torres said with a grim smile. Besides, someone needs to make sure you don't blow us up before we can help the Starwolf. Sarah felt a surge of pride in her crew, in her species, in the stubborn human refusal to accept that suffering was inevitable. The galaxy might have turned its back on the albino Starwolf, but humans never had learned when to quit. All right then, she said, settling into her captain's chair. Let's show the galaxy what happens when you ignore a creature in need. Torres, begin preparations for the electromagnetic pulse. Martinez, I want you monitoring the Starwolf's vital signs. Jackson, plot us a course to the least infested area of the creature's body. As her crew began their preparations, Sarah took one last look at the Starwolf. Its ancient eyes seemed to focus on their small ship. And for a moment, she could have sworn she saw a flicker of hope in those dying stars. The humans were coming to help, and the galaxy was about to learn that sometimes the smallest acts of compassion could change everything. The USS Determination shuddered as Torres rerouted power from every non-critical system. Lights dimmed throughout the ship, and the gentle hum of climate control fell silent. The crew worked in the eerie quiet, their breath beginning to mist in the cooling air as they prepared for what might be their final mission. Life support down to emergency levels, reported Ensign Kim from the environmental station. We've got maybe 4 hours of breathable air if we completely shut down life support during the pulse. Sarah nodded grimly. 4 hours to save a creature that had suffered for 2 centuries. The irony wasn't lost on her that they might suffocate trying to help something breathe freely again. Captain, Doctor, Martinez called from her position at the science station. I'm detecting something strange. The Starwolf's heartbeat is changing. On the main screen, a complex waveform displayed the creature's massive cardiovascular system. What had been a slow, pained rhythm was gradually speeding up, becoming more regular. It knows, Sarah whispered. Somehow, it knows we're trying to help. That's impossible, Jackson said. How could it understand our intentions? Martinez adjusted her sensors, focusing on the Star Wolf's massive head. Star Wolves are empathic creatures, Commander. They can sense emotional resonance across vast distances. It's feeling our determination, our compassion. The creature's head turned more deliberately toward their ship now, and Sarah could see intelligence in those burning eyes. Not just animal awareness, but ancient wisdom accumulated over millennia. The Star Wolf was choosing to trust them, despite centuries of abandonment by every other species in the galaxy. Torres, status report, Sarah commanded. Main deflector array is charged to 180% of normal capacity. He replied, sweat beading on his forehead despite the cold. Fusion cores are running beyond redline. We're literally holding barely controlled explosions together with magnetic fields and prayers. How long can the containment hold? Maybe 20 minutes before catastrophic failure. We get one shot at this, Captain. Sarah studied the tactical display showing their approach to the Star Wolf's flank. The area Torres had selected was covered in thousands of the pulsing parasites, each one a writhing mass of feeding tentacles and armor plating. Some were so large they had their own gravitational fields, creating miniature solar systems of debris and smaller organisms. Martinez, what happens to the parasites when we hit them with the pulse? Unknown, the xenobiologist admitted. Best case scenario, the electromagnetic disruption severs their connection to the Star Wolf's nervous system, and they simply die. Worst case, they become enraged and attack us directly. Attack us? Jackson looked up from his navigation console. Those things can move? Some species of space barnacles are surprisingly mobile when threatened, Martinez explained. And these have been feeding on the life force of one of the galaxy's most powerful creatures. They might have absorbed abilities we can't imagine. The determination continued its careful approach, weaving between the larger parasites. Up close, Sarah could see the true horror of what had been done to the Star Wolf. The parasites hadn't just attached themselves to the creature's skin. They had burrowed deep into its body, creating tunnel networks that glowed with stolen energy. Some had grown so large they had formed symbiotic relationships with each other, creating towers and spires of living corruption across the Star Wolf's back. Captain, Kim called out, her voice tight with worry. I'm reading massive energy spikes from several of the larger parasites. They're responding to our presence. On the screen, the nearest parasites began to pulse more rapidly, their green glow intensifying. Tentacles that had been buried in the Star Wolf's flesh started to withdraw, turning to track the approaching human ship. They're definitely aware of us, Torres reported. And they don't seem happy about it. Sarah made a quick decision. All stop. Hold position here. Captain? Jackson questioned. If we get any closer, we might trigger a feeding frenzy. The Star Wolf is already in agony. We don't want to make it worse. She opened a ship-wide communication channel. All hands, this is the captain. In approximately 15 minutes, we're going to attempt something that's never been tried before. We're going to hurt ourselves to help another living being, not because we have to, but because it's right. She paused, looking out at the Star Wolf's massive form. Every other species in the galaxy has technology more advanced than ours, resources we can only dream of, and they all chose to do nothing. They called this creature's suffering natural, or irrelevant, or cosmically balanced. But humans have never been good at accepting that suffering is natural. We see something in pain, and we act. The crew listened in silence, their faces reflecting the same determination Sarah felt burning in her chest. In a few minutes, we're going to overload every system on this ship to generate an electromagnetic pulse that might free even a small portion of this creature from its torment. We might not survive. We almost certainly won't survive. But if we succeed, we'll have done something no other species was willing to do. We'll have chosen compassion over safety, hope over logic. She closed the channel and turned to Torres. Final preparations, Lieutenant. Let's show the galaxy what humans are made of. The next 10 minutes passed in tense silence as the crew completed their preparations. Systems that had never been connected were jury-rigged together. Safety protocols that existed for good reasons were disabled. The ship's computer issued increasingly frantic warnings that were systematically ignored. Deflector array at maximum charge, Torres reported. All available power rerouted through the main emitter. Fusion cores are approaching critical mass. Target locked, Jackson announced. Focusing on the largest concentration of parasites on the creature's left flank, Dr. Martinez monitored the Star Wolf's vital signs, watching as its heartbeat continued to accelerate. Captain. The creature's brain activity is spiking. It's definitely aware of what we're about to attempt. Sarah took her position in the captain's chair, her hands gripping the armrests tightly. All stations report ready. Engineering ready, Torres called out. Navigation ready, Jackson confirmed. Medical standing by, Martinez added. Environmental systems offline, Kim reported. We're now on stored air. Sarah looked one last time at the Star Wolf, at the ancient suffering in its eyes, at the millions of parasites that had made its existence a living nightmare for 2 centuries. Then she looked at her crew, humans who had chosen to risk everything for a creature they barely understood. Fire, she commanded. The USS Determination became a miniature star. Every joule of energy the ship could generate focused into a single, brilliant pulse that erupted from the main deflector. The electromagnetic wave struck the Star Wolf's flank with the force of a solar flare, and space itself seemed to scream. The effect was immediate and dramatic. Hundreds of parasites simply ceased to exist, their complex biological systems overwhelmed by the electromagnetic assault. Others writhed and detached from the Star Wolf's flesh, drifting away as lifeless husks. The largest parasites, those that had grown to the size of small moons, convulsed as their feeding tentacles were severed from their host. But the pulse did more than just kill parasites. It illuminated something that had been hidden beneath centuries of corruption and pain. As the dead parasites drifted away, patches of the Star Wolf's original silver fur became visible, gleaming like starlight against the darkness of space. The creature's response was immediate and heartbreaking. It let out a sound that registered across every spectrum their instruments could detect. A cry of relief and gratitude that seemed to shake the very fabric of space-time. For the first time in 200 years, a portion of its body was free from pain, but the victory came at a cost. Warning klaxons blared throughout the Determination as fusion containment began to fail. The ship's hull groaned under stresses it was never designed to handle. Sparks erupted from overloaded circuits, and the smell of burning electronics filled the bridge. "Containment breach in engineering," Torres shouted over the alarms. "We've got maybe 2 minutes before the fusion cores explode." Sarah was about to order all hands to abandon ship when something impossible happened. The Star Wolf moved, not the slow, pained drift they had witnessed before, but a deliberate motion toward their failing vessel. Its massive head, now partially freed from the parasites that had tormented it, turned to face the Determination, and then it sang. The sound was unlike anything the human crew had ever experienced. It resonated through their ship, their bodies, their very souls. It was a song of gratitude, of hope, of a debt that could never be repaid. But it was also something more practical. The Star Wolf's song somehow stabilized their failing fusion cores. The electromagnetic harmonics of its voice created a resonance field that contained the building explosion, giving the crew precious time to implement emergency repairs. "Impossible," Torres breathed, watching his instruments as the fusion containment slowly stabilized. "The creature is using its own bioelectromagnetic field to keep us from exploding, Doctor." Martinez was crying openly as she watched the Star Wolf's vital signs. "Look at the brain activity. It's not just grateful. It's trying to heal us the same way we tried to heal it." Sarah felt tears on her own cheeks as she realized what they had accomplished. They hadn't just freed a small portion of the Star Wolf from its parasites. They had given it something far more precious. Hope, the knowledge that somewhere in the galaxy, someone cared about its suffering. The Star Wolf continued to sing, its voice carrying across space to where other ships had begun to arrive. Word of their desperate gambit had spread, and vessels from a dozen different species were approaching to witness the aftermath. But as Sarah watched her instruments, she realized their work was far from over. The electromagnetic pulse had freed less than 5% of the Star Wolf's body. Millions of parasites remained, and some of them were beginning to adapt to the new threat. The largest ones were actually growing stronger, feeding off the fear and anger of their dying companions. "Captain," Jackson said quietly, "we're receiving transmission from the approaching ships. The Zephyrian fleet commander wants to speak with you." Sarah straightened in her chair, preparing to face the galaxy that had ignored this creature's suffering for so long. The Star Wolf was still singing, still protecting the humans who had dared to care when no one else would. They had proven that compassion could triumph over indifference, but the battle was far from over. The reckoning. Fleet Commander Zeloth's image materialized on the main screen. His reptilian features twisted in what Sarah had learned to recognize as Zephyrian disgust. Behind him, she could see the bridge of a massive dreadnought, bristling with weapons that could vaporize the determination without effort. "Human vessel?" Zeloth's voice carried the weight of absolute authority. "You have committed an act of cosmic vandalism. Cease your interference immediately and prepare to be taken into custody." Sarah stood slowly, feeling the eyes of her crew upon her. The Star Wolf's song continued to resonate through their ship, a reminder of what they had accomplished and what still needed to be done. "Fleet Commander," she replied, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her veins. "We have committed an act of compassion. Something your people seem to have forgotten how to do." Zeloth's neck frill flared in anger. "You primitive mammals understand nothing of cosmic order. That creature's suffering serves a greater purpose in the balance of—" "Stop," Sarah interrupted, her voice cutting through his prepared speech like a blade. "Just stop with your excuses. I've heard them all before. Cosmic balance, natural order, greater purpose. They're all just pretty words to hide the fact that you're cowards." The bridge fell silent. Even her own crew stared at her in shock. No one spoke to a Zephyrian fleet commander like that and lived to tell about it. "You have technology that could have freed this creature centuries ago," Sarah continued, her anger building with each word. "You have resources we can only dream of, fleets that span star systems, knowledge accumulated over millions of years, and you chose to do nothing." On the screen, Zeloth's claws extended, a clear threat display. "You dare lecture us, human? Your species has been in space for barely 2 centuries. You know nothing of the complexities of—" "I know enough," Sarah snapped. "I know that when faced with suffering, you calculate profit margins. When confronted with pain, you debate political implications. When shown a creature that has endured torment for 200 years, you call it irrelevant." Behind Zeloth, she could see other bridge officers exchanging glances. Some looked uncomfortable, as if Sarah's words were striking closer to home than they liked to admit. "Doctor." Martinez stepped up beside Sarah's chair. "Commander Zeloth, perhaps you'd like to explain why your scans of this creature never detected the parasite's effect on its consciousness? Or did you know and simply decide it wasn't worth mentioning?" Zeloth's silence was answer enough. The Zephyrians had known exactly what the Star Wolf was enduring, and they had chosen to classify it as unimportant. "Incoming transmission from the Crystalline Empire vessel," Lieutenant Torres announced. Sarah nodded grimly. "Put them on screen." The image shifted to show Ambassador Resonance, a being composed of living crystal that reflected light in hypnotic patterns. When it spoke, its voice chimed like musical instruments. "Human Captain Chen," the crystal being sang, "your actions have disrupted carefully maintained equilibrium. The parasitic organisms serve as biofilters for cosmic radiation. Their removal could destabilize local space-time." "Biofilters, Doctor?" Martinez stepped forward, her scientific curiosity overriding diplomatic protocol. "Ambassador, our scans show no evidence of radiation filtration. The parasites are pure predators, consuming the Star Wolf's life essence for their own reproduction." The crystal being's form shifted, light patterns changing to what Sarah recognized as embarrassment. "Our analysis was preliminary." "Your analysis was non-existent," Sarah shot back. "You never bothered to study them at all, did you? You saw a creature in pain and decided it wasn't your problem." More ships continued to arrive as word spread throughout the galaxy. Sarah watched the tactical display fill with vessels from dozens of species, all coming to witness the confrontation between humanity and the established galactic order. "Captain," Commander Jackson whispered, "we're severely outgunned. One shot from any of these ships would vaporize us." Sarah nodded but didn't back down. The Starwolf's song was growing stronger, and she realized it was communicating not just with them but with something else. The creature's massive head turned toward the assembled fleet, and its song changed, becoming deeper, more complex. "Dr. Martinez," Sarah said, "what's it doing?" The xenobiologist was frantically adjusting her instruments, her face pale with excitement and terror. "Captain, it's calling to others. There are more Starwolves in the galaxy, and they're responding." On the long-range sensors, new contacts began to appear. Distant at first, but approaching rapidly. Not one or two, but dozens. Starwolves from across the galaxy, drawn by their companion's song of hope and liberation. "Impossible," breathed Ambassador Resonance. "Starwolves are solitary creatures. They never gather in groups." "They do when one of their own is finally free from centuries of torment," Sarah replied. "They're coming to see what we've done. To see that someone finally cared enough to try." "Don't forget there." The first of the approaching Starwolves emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the system. It was even larger than their companion, its silver fur unmarked by parasites. Its song joined the albinos, creating a harmony that seemed to resonate through the quantum foam itself. More arrived. And more. Each one adding its voice to the growing chorus, until space itself rang with their combined song. Some were ancient beyond measure, their fur silver with age. Others were young, barely a kilometer long. All of them sang of solidarity, of recognition that their kind would no longer suffer in silence. Fleet Commander Zeloth's image flickered as his ship's system struggled to cope with the quantum resonance. "This is unprecedented. Starwolves are not social creatures. This gathering defies all known xenobiological principles." "Maybe," Sarah suggested, "your principles were wrong." The Starwolves began to position themselves around the albino, their massive forms creating a protective formation around their wounded kin. But they weren't just offering protection. They were offering aid. The younger, healthier Starwolves moved close to their companion, and Sarah watched in amazement as they began to emit focused energy fields. "They're helping remove the parasites," Dr. Martinez reported, her voice filled with wonder. "Using some kind of bioelectromagnetic field to disrupt the remaining organisms." The effect was dramatic. Parasites that had survived the Determination's pulse began to wither and die under the combined assault of the Starwolf pack. The creatures that had tormented their companion for centuries were being systematically destroyed by forces beyond their comprehension. But something else was happening too. As each parasite died, the albino Starwolf grew brighter, stronger. The silver patches on its fur expanded until its entire body gleamed like starlight. The ancient pain in its eyes faded, replaced by something Sarah had never seen there before: joy. The parasites weren't just feeding on its body, Martinez whispered. They were suppressing its natural abilities. It's beautiful." The albino Starwolf was beautiful. As the last of the parasites died, it began to glow with an inner light that rivaled the stars themselves. Its song grew triumphant, and the other Starwolves joined in a celebration that sent ripples through space-time. "Captain," Torres called out, "I'm reading massive power signatures from all the Starwolves. Whatever they're doing, it's affecting every ship in the fleet." Sarah looked at the tactical display and saw that he was right. The Starwolves' combined song was creating some kind of resonance field that was overwhelming the weapons systems of every vessel present. Not destroying them, but rendering them inert. The galaxy's most powerful warships had been reduced to passengers in their own space. "They're not threatening us," Sarah realized. "They're ensuring we can't threaten each other. They want us to talk instead of fight." The albino Starwolf, now free of its tormentors and glowing with renewed life, turned its attention to the human ship. It approached slowly, carefully, until its massive head was just meters from their hull. When it spoke, its voice was no longer pained but warm, grateful, filled with ancient wisdom. The translation system struggled to convey the complexity of its communication, but the meaning was clear. It was thanking them, not just for the rescue, but for showing the galaxy that compassion could triumph over indifference. That the smallest act of kindness could change everything. "Incoming transmission from Earth," Jackson announced. "It's Admiral Harrison." The Admiral's weathered face appeared on a corner of the screen, his expression a mixture of pride and concern. "Captain Chen, what you've done out there, it's caused quite a stir. The entire Galactic Council is in emergency session. Some are calling for sanctions against humanity. Others are demanding explanations." Sarah smiled as she watched the Star Wolves continue their celebration. "Tell them the explanation is simple, Admiral. We saw something suffering, and we acted. It's what humans do. The consequences," Harrison began, "will be whatever they are," Sarah finished. "But right now, a creature that endured 2 centuries of agony is free. That's worth any consequence they can threaten us with." The Star Wolves' song was changing again, becoming something new. As Sarah listened, she realized they were composing a ballad, a story that would be carried across the galaxy by their kind. The story of the humans who refused to accept that suffering was inevitable, who risked everything to help a stranger, who showed an indifferent universe the power of compassion. Fleet Commander Zeloth appeared on screen again, but his demeanor had changed. The arrogance was gone, replaced by something that might have been shame. "Captain Chen, the Zephyrian High Command has reconsidered its position. We are prepared to offer assistance with any remaining parasites in the system. We are PT R14, as are we," chimed Ambassador Resonance. "The Crystalline Empire acknowledges that our initial assessment was inadequate." One by one, the various fleet commanders offered aid, resources, expertise. The same beings who had turned their backs on the Star Wolf's suffering for centuries were now competing to help clean up the remaining parasites in the system. Sarah looked around at her crew, at the humans who had risked everything for a creature they barely understood. "I suppose we should accept their help," she said. "After all, this was never about proving humans are better than anyone else. It was about proving that we can all be better than we were." The Star Wolves' song reached its crescendo as the albino raised its head toward the stars. It was no longer an albino. Its fur now gleamed silver-white, like captured starlight. The transformation was complete, the healing absolute. What had been broken was now whole. What had been tormented was now free. But perhaps more importantly, the galaxy itself had been transformed. The Star Wolves' ballad would spread to every corner of known space, carrying with it a simple message. Compassion is not weakness. Kindness is not naive, and sometimes the smallest gesture can change everything. As the fleet began coordinating cleanup efforts and the Star Wolves continued their celebration, Sarah settled back in her captain's chair. They had set out to save one creature, and ended up reminding an entire galaxy what it meant to care about something beyond oneself. The universe was vast and often cruel, but as long as beings existed who were willing to sacrifice for strangers, who chose hope over fear and kindness over indifference, there would always be light in the darkness. The Star Wolves sang of this truth as they danced among the stars, and the galaxy listened and remembered what it had forgotten about the power of compassion.